Bobby Broyles and Tim McDonald here.
Should be a really interesting matchup. Buckle up. If you're not watching, you got some problems.
Flipping the calendar to November here on this episode of This Week in CA Football, presented by Geico. If that sounded crazy to you, it did to us. Tim McDonald to my right. I'm Bobby Broyles, and we've already reached the home stretch of the season with the final month of play.
Got to start last week in Durham, where New Hampshire opened some eyes across the board with a 43-14 win over Stony Brook. Wildcats forced 5 turnovers, all thanks to Prince Smith Jr. and Quinlan Dean. Both had 2 picks. The UNH defense limited the Seawolves to 2.3 yards per carry on 44 rushing attempts, moving to 5-1 in league play, now have the off week. Which Bear is best? Fact. Right now, it's the Black Bears, if I was Dwight Schrute himself, but 5th straight win last weekend, beating William Mary 35-28, got out to a huge lead. What else can you say about Micah Wright coming up with the punt return touchdown that ultimately proves to be the game winner? That was in the 3rd quarter, and then JMU puts up 84 points over Rhode Island. Absolutely astonishing. Brian Shore sets a single game completion percentage record for the Dukes, 21 of 22 for 5 touchdowns passing. That's all you need to know about that one. Albany ends a 3-game losing skid with a 27-3 win over Elon. 2 defensive scores for the Danes, both in the second half. Still alive right now in the playoff picture, as are many other teams. We'll get into it, but congrats to Delaware interim head coach Dennis Doughton-Carter as well. The Hens snap a 5-game losing skid. A big win over Towson at home, I should say. A much-needed win, but congrats to him as well. I know it's been a tough couple stretch for Delaware as well down the week.
Indeed, a big win for the Blue Hens. 3rd straight weekend featuring 5 games across the conference, and 2 of those are key television matchups. Let's start with the first game of Saturday in Orono on Fox College Sports, featuring Maine hosting Villanova at noon.
The old wily veteran and Andy Talley versus the young buck, the first-year head coach and Joe Harris-Simiak. Both kind of joked this week on the conference call about the difference in age and just the funny contrasting styles. But both teams not only could use a big win here, but both, let's be honest, could use a quality win. As Villanova could use a quality win on the road, and Maine could pick up a quality win at home. Nova has won 2 straight in this series, had the bye week, which I think should help a little bit. Let's be honest, Wildcats are right now number 1 in scoring defense in CAA, number 1 in rushing defense. Must key on Maine's passing game. If we've talked about Maine, we've talked about the passing game. How many players have come up big for them? And guys that we don't really know yet at the wide receiver position. 4 players right now with 200 or more receiving yards, led by, of course, Micah Wright has 5 touchdowns on the year. 4 other players who have at least 8 catches and over 100 yards. So up and down the board, the wide receiver crew, Dan Collins, his life has been easier because there's been so many wide receivers step up. Last year's game was an offensive struggle in Philly, kind of ugly, 13-3 win for Villanova. But I think both teams, since that last meeting a year ago, have completely changed things on offense and know what they want to do, know where they want to start. Safe to say Maine hasn't faced a defense during this 5-game winning streak that's like Villanova. And on the other hand, outside of Richmond, I think Nova hasn't faced a team like Maine that right now is playing with all its cards on the table, knows what it needs to get done down the stretch. So that, to me, is the intriguing part of this game. Really nice to start with this game as the first game of Saturday before you get into the rest of the games as well.
And speaking of that, skipping ahead to 3:30 on Comcast Sportsnet, James Madison heads to Richmond in a game that all of the FCS will have their eyes on. The Dukes are the lone undefeated CA football team remaining, while the Spiders had to wait an extra week after coming off a bye. Top 10 showdown is only fitting for the latest chapter of this rivalry.
I don't know how we didn't start with this game, but you have to sometimes with the times. I get that one. But you really don't know what else you can add to Madison's monster victory last week. And we could talk about defensive stats. We could look at a bunch of similarities. But other than that, I think the Dukes were just ready to prove we're off the bye week. We can get it done on both sides equally. I think it's setting up to be another classic.
Yes.
It's hard to forget, but let's remember last year, College Game Day came to town in Harrisonburg. All eyes were on the Dukes, and not a lot of people gave Richmond a good chance in that game. 2 highly ranked teams, and Richmond stole the show. A 59-49 win really propelled the Spiders down the stretch all the way through the playoff run. Again, another team that has an extra week to prepare and prep. And you talk about Brian Shore versus Kyle Lauletta. Number 1 and number 2 in passing efficiency in CAA football right now. 15 touchdowns for Shore, 16 touchdowns for Lauletta. Both complete over 60% of passes, and more importantly, both take care of the ball and know what they're doing with the ball. Offenses take center stage, and rightfully so, but defense, sometimes in these types of games, is key for me this time around. Richmond rush defense equals 133.9 yards allowed per game. JMU averages over 300 yards rushing per game. Something's got to give there. Yeah, I look at Brian Brown. I look at Tyler Wilkins versus Taylor Reynolds in that JMU secondary. We saw Raven Green had 2 interceptions last week. It's going to be really interesting to watch that matchup all day long. Talk about Bob Trott, the defensive coordinator now for James Madison in the offseason, comes over from the University of Richmond, basically is running the same exact defense that Richmond had installed the last couple of years. Danny Rocco and crew are well aware of that. Is that connection going to factor in? Not sure. Is it going to play a big role? We don't know. But it's only added to the hype of this game as things. And the rivalry between these two teams, I think it goes obviously way back, but I think it's also deeper than people around the FCS level understand it. It's the streamers, it's the purple and gold versus Richmond blue and red. It's a lot of other things that go besides the game on the field. Number of teams, these teams right now are the top 2 teams in the conference. I think many people would agree with that, but it's a perfect setting and a perfect stage in early November to have these 2 teams playing in a top 10 matchup that, if you're an FCS fan, how would you not want to tune in?
So you're saying it's a big game.
It's a big game, to say the least.
Looking back now to a 1 o'clock start when Albany takes on Delaware at Bob Ford Field. Both teams snapped losing streaks last week, which only adds more intrigue to the playoff hunt for the Great Danes.
Behind a career-high 210 yards on the ground and a touchdown in the second half. 2 touchdowns defensively. Albany behind a Bidigan Hanks gets it done, comes back to life a little bit with that win over Elon. The Danes are now 5-3 overall and finish the season with 2 of the 3 final games at home. Obviously, you don't want to look ahead if you're the Great Danes, but Delaware, I mean, the good news for the Hens, on the other hand, get a much-needed win at home over Towson. The defense played well last week, only allowed 206 total yards and 2 field goals, did not allow a touchdown in the win over Towson. Thought they set the tone early, and we talked about last week which team wanted to come out and win. I think it was pretty clear from the start that Delaware was a little bit more hyped up for that one. 5-game losing skid was its longest for Delaware since 1939, which is insane. But Great Danes last week, I think you know what to expect. 56 rushes, including 35 from Bidigan Hanks versus 9 passes total last week. Delaware, on the other hand, 15 pass attempts and 55 rush attempts. I think we know what the bread and butter is for each squad, so I expect both defenses to key on stopping the run game. That's how this game is going to be won.
A rare 2 o'clock start on Long Island as William & Mary squares off versus Stony Brook, with the Seawolves looking to respond from their first conference loss last week.
I think you take it 2 ways. First, slow starts have been a problem for both of these teams, but for the Tribe, it's kind of been a problem all year. Happened again last week, down 28-7 at one point in the first half. Fought back well, but it was too little too late. Anderson again, over 150 rushing yards, but just too little too late. The Seawolves, like the Tribe, also started slow last week and couldn't dig out of that hole. 15-0 deficit, 5+ minutes in. Joe Carbone did throw 2 touchdowns, but also had 4 picks. I think at times, you look at Stony Brook last week, the run game obviously couldn't find itself. Bedell and Gowns both held in check last weekend for the first time in a while. It's going to be the focal point again, depending on the chance for winnings for Stony Brook this week. It helps to come home if you're the Seawolves. It also helps that your first conference loss happened this late in the season. And I know that sounds weird saying that, but in some ways it is a good thing because you know what you have to do left. Okay, we didn't end the season on there's a lot of football left to be played. So as strange as it is for Stony Brook to pick up a conference loss this late, you also still know what you have in front of you. Stony Brook still has to play Maine, still has to play Albany after this week, where the Tribe play Towson, and then of course play Richmond to end this season. So interested in this game because you have 2 teams of contrasting styles, with Stony Brook knowing what's ahead and Tribe really having to play the spoiler at this point in the season, which is strange to think about.
Let's wrap up Week 10 with another 2 o'clock game featuring Towson welcoming Elon to town.
2 teams that are really trying to find some light right now, and especially on offense, both towards the bottom in scoring right now, both towards the bottom in rushing. 2 teams where you look at the play of the offense the last couple weeks. Towson last week at Delaware, offense struggled, turned the ball over. We saw 2 different quarterbacks. I just think it's 2 teams with Elon. Thompson is still trying to figure things out. The defenses for both teams, you could argue, haven't really played that bad. It's just it's tough to come up with defensive stops. It's tough to not let teams score when your offense isn't producing. And Elon right now and Towson both have a lot of similarities in that sense. I think when you have a game at this late in the season, with the records aside, this is a game for me where if you're Elon and if you're Towson, you're trying to find some momentum to end the season strong. You have to find something. You can't just show up. You have to find something. For both of these teams, I think it's a good experience to play this game and realize that you still can grab some momentum and still finish the strong on a good note.
If you need television clearance information or links to watch the live streams and live stats, cafootball.com has all that and more.
Can't forget, before we end this, can't remind you guys, you can watch Elon's Going Deep feature. We've talked about that a couple times, which premieres tomorrow on cafootball.com, as well as our social media platforms. I know it's the 4th feature of this fall as part of our continued on-campus coverage. Looking forward to it. I know Mike did a great job with this one. And again, 4 down and 2 more left.
Thanks as always for tuning in. Enjoy the game Saturday.